So now, like, the user can enter like these things, like, details, like, and this is a page group. And then after entering the details, the user will continue. And then now we know that, okay, how loan type, and then if I have a loan, and then this is a page list where the subscript, we can see it's an integer. Okay, so now let's say I have already have loans, let's say education loan and a personal loan, and then I'm applying for, let's say, a home loan. Then, if we continue it, so then we have seen that how we can put the visible on condition. So let's say my internet, sorry, my application, should get rejected. So I'll select the reject. I mean, or manager will says reject, and then, like, he will put a comment saying that, okay, so whatever the comments, okay, like this is a comment, like, and then of course we have seen that how we can place this kind of a message, right? So if the minimum and maximum characters that we want to place or someone, let's say the bank manager, like he has done it, okay, so only 4 characters, then we just throw the error saying that minimum it should be 15 characters, and the maximum that we know that we have put it to 500 characters. And then let's say it's submitted, and that's it. So we have the email that will go to that particular person who has applied for a loan. Okay, so this is what till now that we have done it. So now let's say, okay, so now today we'll see about validations. Okay, so now what we have done till here is, like, let's say loan process. Okay, so now, of course, now that, of course, the one validation that we have done is, let's say if I try to continue, then now if there is some mandatory fields are there, then I mean, of course, I can throw the error message to the user, like, you have to fill the mandatory fields, otherwise, you can't be able to proceed further. I mean, to the next screen. But now, let's say if I'll enter first name, like, of course, like, something I have entered like this, and then in the date of birth, I have entered, let's say, tomorrow, or say 16th of February date, and then, phone number I have entered something like this. Big characters, like, like this. An email ID I have entered, again, again, something like this. So which is, now again, I can easily go continue it, right? And the Pega is not throwing any error, right? I mean, because the Pega is just validating that, user has entered that required field or not. But something, we should validate the fields, right? I mean, now if you notice that, any forms, whenever you fill it, if you enter some rate, some data wrongly, so you will get immediately an error message, right? I mean, or basically it will throw an error message saying that, your number on your that particular field is not correct and all this stuff. So same thing, we'll see today, like, how we can do that, so how we can validate it, so we'll validate two things. Like, one, that we will validate it, is like, date of birth. We'll see it, like, how we can validate date of birth. Okay, so like that, so that, first. So now what we'll do is, so we have a flow action, right? So now we know that, like, this section is getting into flow action. So now what we do is we'll just open that flow action. So this is a live UI. So if you want to open any flow action in a section, so you can just click on this live UI, and then you can just go to that flow action. Okay, so now this is a full action that we have seen, where in the layout tab you have to refer the section name. So if you see here, the second tab is something called as validation. So if you click on that tab, so now you can just create. So now today we'll see about one more rule, which is called as a validate rule. So till now we have seen about case type rule, flow rule, property rule, section rule, full action rule, then what else, like, all these things, a section rule. So now, like, today we'll see about validate true. So now what we'll do is, we'll just create one validate personal details. Okay. So again, say very similar thing, like, now if this validation rule will thing that, if it could be common and all the stuff, then we can just change the class and all the stuff, and make sure that, your all your rules are in a proper, I mean, in your rules and rules set version only, like, because as I said, right, in the real time, I mean, there will be many rules and versions, like, for multiple team members. So so yeah, just make sure that So now that we are only working on this application, so we know that it's over and over and over and over. But in real time, you have to be very careful about in which class you are creating it and which root set and version that you are creating your roots. So now this is how your validation rule looks like. So now it's asking you, okay, which property that you want to validate. So now first is, let's say we want to validate our date of birth. So just put the dot. So now, of course, we know, because we know that whenever we have to refer any property, we refer it with a dot. So dot and then select the property name. So it's a date of birth that we want to validate. So what do you want to validate? So that you have to click on add here. So just click on add and then select a function. So Pega has provided these many functions. So you can see here, like a date time is in future past and expression evaluates to true, then first date time, second date time, and all these things. So these are all the out of the box functions of which Pega has provided. So we don't have to code anything. Like we just use any one of the function to make our make this happen. So now because this is related to date time, so now we'll just the first function itself, you see here, I'll select this. So now I'm selecting a function as date time is in past or future. So now as after selecting this, so now what I'm saying is if date time is in future, so let's say if the date of birth is future date, then we can just add an error message. So saying that please enter past date. That's it. Submit this, save it. And then save the flow action. Okay, so now if I'll try to submit the screen, so you can see here, like, we got that error message, like, whatever that we have given in the validation rule, like, please enter a past date. So I can now, let's say if I'll enter another future date, let's say next year date, I have entered it, like, 2024. Again, if I'll try to submit it, so again, like, the Pega is throwing an error message. So, and then if I'll try to, let's say, enter past date, let's say anytime like the 2017. So now if I'll try to continue, so now, like now that I'm able to continue it because we have entered a past date. I mean, like that. So, and that we have done it simply with the help of a Pega's out of the box function, like this. In a similar way, let's say we want to validate whether email ID is correct or not. I mean, like that, because in email ID, how do we validate? Like, I mean, email ID should have at the rate and dot, right? So that, that is something we can say that yes, we have the user has entered valid email ID. So then what we do is just click on that add icon, and then we'll say, let's say email ID, email address. And then for email address, we have like, one more, like, edit, just like that, edit, validate. Okay. And then the validation of, I mean, which property, like, validation of email address by using, we have mini edit validate rule again, like, valid email address, like that. Okay, so now this is a Java code. So now if you'll open it, so you'll see that there is a Java code, already written by the Pega. So you don't have to code. I mean, of course, you can create your own edit validate rule, but I mean, you should. But you have to be Java expert basically, like, or else like that. So, but of course, the Pega doesn't suggest you to write this coding and all the stuff, because Pega itself has provided, like, all the functions and all the stuff. So I'm just saying that, okay, I've selected this for email address. I've selected this function, where I'm validating my email address with the help of this edit validate rule. Okay, and now which is again a Java code, not written by us. Already Pega has given that code. And then if it fails, you can see here, if it fails, then like if fails means, like, if the user has not entered a proper email address, then we can just throw an error message out, please enter valid email address. Save it. Okay. Okay, and then now if I'll try to, sorry, if I'll try to continue it with the same email address. So here we go. So now we are getting that error message that, please enter valid email address. And now if I'll enter only, let's say, name only. Okay, again, this is wrong because this is not also like, not a valid email address. Now, if I'll enter, let's say like that, pankaj@pega.com, which is a valid email address. So now if I'll try to continue it, then you can see here that error has gone, like, now. So you can see here that now this is how, basically we can validate our details, with the help of this validate rule. Like, of course, there are two ways. One, that, again, this is also validation. Like, for example, let's say, restricting users to enter, not proceeding further without entering the details. And this is again another type of a validation rule, wherein which whatever the user has entered, so that it should also be like, a proper details. I mean, it should not like, I mean, in email address, I have entered some numbers and I'm submitting a date of birth. I'm entering 10 years later date, which is not what doesn't make any sense. Okay, and in the similar way, we have for phone numbers too. We have the same stuff, like, for like for phone number. So we can just again, let's say, just type edit validate. So we have valid phone number. Here we go. So now again, like, for validate phone number also, if you click on the circle icon, so again you can see here. And how will you know whether this is a Pega's out of the box code, or a rule provided by Pega? So you can see here, this is the rule, and you can see that rule set also. Its rule set name is Pega-Procom, which is again the Pega's rule set version, which you can't edit it. Like, for example, even if I try to edit something like this, so you can see here the Pega does not provide any of the button wherein which I can edit this. So of course I can just save as this. So if I have to edit this, let's say like I have to make this, as per my requirement. So what I have to do is like, I can't do anything. I mean, or not me, like, or any developer can't edit anything in the Pegasus rule set. So what we do is normally we just save as this and then save as to our rule set, whatever the rule set that we have it. And then like, then we just say create an open. Okay, now I can be able to edit anything. So now if I want, then I can do, I mean, update this and I can save it basically. Okay, so now I just, okay, delete this because this is not needed. Okay, so now if I try to continue it, okay, so now this Pega is like, so now I didn't, okay, valid phone number. So I'll save it. So now I'll try to continue. Okay, maybe I didn't save it properly. Okay, so now, so this will, okay, so valid phone number will only check whether like, it's something like that. So now if I'll enter some uh, text basically. So you can see here, like, so it's just saying like, this is not a valid, please, please enter a valid phone number. Okay, so this is again like, based on your requirement, you can basically decide whether or validate it, like, all the details. And how, where we refer this validate rule in the flow action. So now in the flow action, in the layout tab, so you can see here you have a section, and in the validation tab, you can just create one more validation rule. I mean, one validation rule just to validate all your details. It could be your date of birth, or it could be your like, first name, last name, just to check whether it is a valid text or not, or valid string or not, or for a number, let's say amount, it's a valid a number or not, and like that. So this way, based on your requirement, you can just, put all the validations basically, you know. So yeah, and then another is like, let's say number, like, of course you can see here, I mean, although I am validating only for numbers, but user can enter something like this. If he's entering something like this, and then if he's trying to continue, and then you can see that user is able to proceed further. So all these things, for example, let's say you want to do, or you in the same rule, in that you want to add a Java code that not only checks for characters, but it also should for the maximum number of length, I mean, because in India, we have like, 10 digit as a phone number. Then, in US, it's a number, it could be, it's not 8 digit or like a different kind of a number digits that we have it. So, like that, so for that, how to restrict users, I mean, if, let's say for India, like, to only to 10 digit. So what we can do is we just go to that section rule. So one way that we know that, we can just add that maximum minimum in the property rule only in the presentation. So we can just add the minimum and maximum. And then another option that we have is, so if you open the property rule, and then if you go to the advanced tab, and here you can see that the max length. So now if I'll enter only 10, then once I save it, so now if I'll run a case, okay, so now if I try to enter some number, so you can see here I'm typing it, but it's maximum, like, it is not allowing me to proceed further. In the similar way, like, we can add for a card number. Let's say debit card number is of 16 digit. So 16 digit, we cannot enter more than 16 digit. And like that. So now we can just put that maximum characters as, 16 digit. Okay, so this is how, any questions till now from anyone?
Okay.
Yeah, no? Okay, okay. Okay. So now, like, so validations also, like, so today we are learning about validation, right? So now validations are also like, we have two types. One is the client side validation. Okay. And then we have server side validation. Okay, so now what is that meaning? Okay, client-side validation is like, we have like, required fields, like, how we have made it to required, like that. So now, for example, let's say, okay, let's say like, I'm applying for a loan, and then as I said, right, I mean, that star mark means like it's for the mandatory field. So this is also one type of validation, right? I mean, you're not allowing user to proceed further. But let's say, but you can see here, I'm clicking on that field, and then I'm clicking out of that field. You can see that immediately the Pega is throwing an error message like, value cannot be blank. And then a similar way, I'm clicking on the phone number, but I'm not entering anything. And I moved out of this field. I'm clicking somewhere else, like, like this. So you can see here immediately I'm getting an error message. But let's say I'm entering, so this is called as a client-side validation that, immediately, like, if you make a mistake, and immediately if you make any mistake and you click somewhere out of that field, you immediately will get an error message saying that, okay, boss, like, it's not with the proper details, or this should not be blank and all this stuff. But in a similar way, we have added a validation rule, right? We have created a validation rule. So, like, for example, for date of birth, we have created, right? So now if I'll enter, let's say, future date, like this, and if I'll click somewhere else and all these things, and I'm trying to add the family details, and all these things, so you can see that the Pega is not throwing any error message. Similar way, let's say email ID, I'm entering wrongly, like, I've entered some numbers, and then, I've entered let's say phone number also wrong, like, I'm entered some text, something like this. So still you can see that the error messages, I mean, there is no error message, like, when I'm clicking on all these things. So error message will come only when, let's say, after entering all the details. Now if I'll try to submit the flow action, so now what I'm trying to do is, when I'm clicking this, so now what I'm doing, I'm submitting this flow action, right? And I'm moving into the next flow action, or next action basically, or next screen basically. So that is then, like, so now this is what the server-side validation is. So now server-side validation means, like, when you try to submit it, and then on click of submit, it will just validate it, like, go to the server and just validate all your details. Okay, for example, like this. Okay, it will validate all your details, and then it will throw an error message saying that, okay, so now please enter valid phone number, please enter valid email address, please enter pass date, all these things. So this is the difference between a server-side validation and a client-side validation. Okay, so now, so okay, required field and the server-side validation, like, we have seen that. So validate rule, like, which we refer it in a flow actions validation tab. and this will occur on submit of on submit of the action. Okay, like that. Okay, so then we'll see a few more kind of client side validation. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll from this flow action, I'll just remove this validation tool. Okay, and I'll save this. So now, like, whatever of course, the validation rule is still present, but now what I've done is I'm not referring it anywhere. I'm just keeping it as is. So now we'll validate in some other way. For example, now, okay, for phone number, like we know that we have a valid phone number, validated true, right? So now that we can also refer it. For example, in the property rule, if you open it, if you go to the advanced tab, and you can see that max length, like, we can give, let's say you want to restrict any field. For example, same property is a card number. So you can just give 16 so that user intentionally also they can't even enter more than 16 characters, 16 digit number, more than 16 digit number. And then if you come down, you can see here, there is option which is called as use validate. So don't get confused. Again, a very important question in interview, like, what is the difference between edit validate? Like, so now we'll see that, this is like, edit validate. Validate. Okay, so now this edit validate means, like, here, like, I've already shown you example of two edit validate tool. Here we do a Java coding here, Java expertise needed basically. So, like, so of course, Pega has provided many out of the box edit validated tools, so we can make use of them. So now we can see that, like, now that, so if you just click, so as I've already told you, whenever you see a blue bar like this, so for any field, so that means there is something in the bottom, there. I mean, if you click on the down arrow key from your keyboard, so now the Pega will throw you all the edit validated rules, whatever that you have created, or also which is existing in that application. So now you can just search it, valid phone number. Okay, so here we go. So now this is a valid phone number, and then that's it, save it. And in the similar way, open the email address property. Same thing, we'll do it. We'll go to the advanced tab, and you can see that use validate. So now here we'll just type it as valid email address. Save it. Okay, that's it. I've done it. So now let's say if the user is trying for a loan, then we'll just create new. Okay, so now what will happen is, so earlier I've shown you, right? I mean, it was not throwing any error message if the user is trying to enter a wrong detail. So now if I'll try, let's say phone number, I've entered it, but I've entered some text, not number. So you can see here, I'm clicking somewhere out of the field. I mean, when I'm clicking, out of that particular field, you can see here, I'm getting an error message that please enter a valid phone number. In a similar way, let's say if I don't enter a valid email address, I've entered it, and if I'm moving out of that field, you can see here immediately I'm getting the error message as please enter a valid phone number. Okay, so this is what the difference between a client-side validation, sorry, edit validate and validate true. So edit validate means it's a client-side validation, and the validate true server-side validation. And of course, for this edit validate true, we need a Java coding. Like, so I've already shown you, right, one of them. So let's say valid phone number. If I'll open, let's say here, you can see here, Java expertise or Java code needed basically to create this. But whereas for this validate true, there is no Java code needed. You can just create it. It's very simple to configure. All that you need to know is, like, you have to use the Pega's out of the box functions. And also you can call, you can call from this validate true, you can call edit validate true too. Same thing we have done for phone number and email address. So how to call it? For that, we have one function which is called as this, validation of property name using edit validate name. If it fails, then this is what does, and then you can just throw an error message, whatever that you want, basically. Okay, so this is what, like, we have, okay, validations. Okay, so this way we basically, we can just validate it. So just don't get confused about this edit validate true and validate true. So some if you're working, let's say in Pega, like if your teammates or something, can say that okay, it's edit validate true. So just make sure that I mean, so that something is you can't. And this one again, we can't refer directly in a flow action. I mean, but this rule validated rule, will call like, and this we refer it in a property, basically, refer it in the advanced tab, of the property. Okay, and advanced tab of the property and okay, and also like, also from validation. Okay, also from validate true. So like that. Okay, and then this validate rule, we have seen that we refer it from the to action. Okay, and then this will call on submit of the action. Prior to that, like, even if you're whatever that you're doing in that particular screen, so again it depends on the requirement. So some client says that, I mean, I want all their messages to be shown, like, I want that all the server-side validation, or I want okay client-side validation. So it's up to the business, so the business, how they want, or how they want to validate their application. So whether it's a client-side validation or a server-side validation. Okay. So, but something like, that I've shown you, that how basically you can validate your details. And okay, another one, like, one of the ways to validate is, for example, let's say a drop down. Okay, so now if I'll show you that, I mean, let's say the type of loan, I've already given the option to the user, like, you can user can't enter. For example, let's say, okay, here. So now let's say, like, even if I want to add, let's say, like, our bank offers only three types of loan. So now I can't enter, for example, let's say if I'll ask user to enter the loan type. So what can happen is, like, user can enter education loan. I mean, there can be a possibility that, user can make spelling mistakes, right? I mean, this we can't have. For this, we cannot have any restrictions on all these things, where we can just check for a spelling and all those things. I mean, because this is very tough, to validate. So in those cases, what we can do is we can have a validation. I mean, we can have a drop down or radio button, again, depending on requirement, so that user will not have any option to add or update anything. Like, of course, like, if user want education loan, then user has to select it education loan. I mean, there is no possibility, like, I mean, again, like, of course, we displayed all the spelling mistakes and everything, there is no point of doing that, so everything will be, there. So this is again another type of a validation. I mean, not, that we can give it to the option, like, I mean, not allowing user to enter anything, like, simply he can just enter it, I mean, select it, from the drop down. That's it. So that's the only thing, for me to cover for today. Like, so any questions from anyone? Okay, the long silence, I'll take it as a no. Okay, okay, so hope, like, if it's clear, like, so how we can just place the validation rules and all the stuff. So you can see here how, like, I mean, of course, we have started it from only the stage and step, but, slowly we are moving our application, like, to more, like, extended, like, all these things advanced extent. So, like, wherein which we are basically, like, entering all the details and everything, validating it, required field and all those things, and, like, of course, in future we will add few more components here, like, we'll see basically, like, we'll try to make it, more in an advanced way, like, I mean, what happens and how to and all these things.